Some of my best memories growing up were riding with Brian. BMX took us a lot of places. We had a lot of great times. But as everyone, as you kind of move on in life, you got to decide what you're going to do. I went the route. I had kids. My wife and I have a preschool that we take care of kids. Here we are. It's 2012. Brian's 40 years old, and Brian's still out there riding with the kids. Okay, so little brother Brian Keith Foster, born June 29th, 1972 in Wilmington, Delaware, resided in Elkton, Maryland, but right across the border was his birthplace. Yeah, he was the youngest of the three. I had an older brother too, brother Ken. Brian had a yellow Tonka dump truck. He used to throw that thing at both of us. That was a good memory. My dad grew up racing motorcycles, so he'd race these enduros and hare scrambles, and we'd always go out to these places in the Northeast in the woods, and we would camp the night before and be in the station wagon with your little Coleman cooler and your igloo tent, and that was the life we did. We loved it, you know, and I think we had our bikes with us probably, so that whole motorcycle, bike riding, campground kind of followed through us. And obviously, because my dad was so into, he worked at a motorcycle shop, he raced motorcycles, he was actually a sponsored guy for Harley at one point, so we rode motorcycles super early. And I remember coming home from school, and that's the first thing we wanted to do was get on our Z50, and we'd just do laps in our backyard, just fields, and you could go for miles. And I got a feeling that's where all the bike handling and all that kind of stuff came from. It's just, that's what we grew up doing. When we lived in Elkton, Maryland, had local dirt jumps, you know, a mile down the road, all these kids built jumps in the woods, and that's what we did. One day, a kid came to us and said, hey, I raced last weekend, Lum's Pond BMX in Newark, Delaware, you know. It was really cool. I skipped the soccer game and I went there and raced my first race and came back and said how cool it was, and the next weekend, Brian raced his first race. And then a couple months went by of us racing these really terrible bikes, and then he went out and bought a Mongoose, and I bought a Raleigh, and we were off and running. Then in like 83-ish, we moved to Joppa, Maryland. And that was where Wheel Power, that was the local bike shop there, and we both got super into that. We both worked there. The owner had a son, and he had this big white panel van with Wheel Power inside, and we started driving to maybe nationals or regionals or whatever they were called, and then we started going to some nationals farther away, and our parents gained the trust. But like, I think the superstar of Wheel Power is when he went to the ABA Grands that one year. He was 16 and he won 16X. We had never raced ABA, but we got on a plane and he qualified first moto, however the ABA transfer system worked at the time, and went on. And I remember him doing good in his quarter and his semi. I'm like, wow, he can really win this thing. And he straight up with his 18-inch C-post, and he won. Because there was a skate park, the Edgewater Bowl was right next to Wheel Power. It was this run-down, broken concrete skate park that we would scoop out the water of, and you know, there'd be these broken lips, and that's where Brian learned a lot of his tricks on these fly-out jumps, and that's where we're there every day after school.
I think the first time, you know, Brian ever had a photo in a magazine, and I still remember this photo, was back when Super BMX used to be one of the magazines on the scene, and he was doing a no-footed can-can, and his legs were so straight, you know, he like had that style, and it was like, man, this dude can jump.
I always remembered him jumping and having style on the track, as well as being in first place or second place. Brian always had really crazy hair, always big flops, just being a pretty funny looking dude.
Wheel Power's kind of going downhill. I don't know what was going on there, getting in RC cars and skis, and that was kind of fading away. I had just moved to California. He had still had 2 years of high school left.
After Wheel Power, he rode for another weird, obscure bike shop team called Good Times, which was some rich lady whose kid got into BMX that was no good, so she started a team to like sponsor her kid, really. So he goes from Wheel Power to Good Times, you know, bike shop teams. And then I believe that's when Cyclecraft came about. He went from bike shop dude to get points to the factory rider to help sell products. Boy, Cyclecraft, their uniforms were very pastel.
They had a pretty good thing, that whole Midwest, East Coast Cyclecraft thing. with big Fred's legs and goofy 6-piece bars and all that, but it was cool stuff, you know. He started traveling with people like Timmy Strzelecki, Keith Mulligan, that whole cyclecraft crowd. He graduated high school, was going to go to college, was signed up for college. He said, hey, Mom and Dad, I'm moving to Kingsport, Tennessee.
So Brian moved down there to work for Cyclecraft and lived with the Martinos, and they basically took him in as, you know, one of their own. He just worked painting bikes and traveling and racing.
Every bike was custom painted for Cyclecraft. You would pick the color, and you'd pick if you wanted splat paint on it, polka dots, and that's what Brian did. You know, he'd sit there and spray the frame one color, and then sit there with a brush and throw splats onto it.
So the story goes, Brian Foster was colorblind in painting the most obnoxious custom color frames that were just insane looking. Kids were specific about what they ordered, and there's no way they were getting what they ordered. I'm assuming he never told anybody he was colorblind.
When you first told me that he was colorblind, I was like, no wonder he had all his gay bikes. But it was cool. It definitely made a name for himself, you know, got his wild antics out there, you know, and obviously he backed it right up with his skills on the track. And once you start getting into the cyclecraft days, that's when like people really nationwide and worldwide started taking notice of Brian Foster.
He was definitely part of that crew of dudes that would ride trails and just ride mini ramps, backyard ramps, whatever else, and race, not just focus on racing and lifting weights. At that time, he's racing against dudes that spent their days in high school pumping iron and training and getting fast. And Brian was just a scrawny dude, but he just somehow, physically, he's just built to haul ass on a BMX bike.
I think Brian was just, you know, a super good competitive BMX racer who was just good at everything else and loved to ride his bike.
Yeah, boy.
In '91, Brian got the 18 and over X title in the NBL, and then next year turned pro, so he got the title in Superclass. Then the Martinos sold Cyclecraft because they were just retiring.
So after Cyclecraft, Brian hooked up with Hyper, which is a friend of his at the time, Clay Goldsmith. It was a good thing for Brian to get on Hyper right then because there weren't a whole lot of options, and I think Clay really had his back, so I think that was a good fit at the time.
Then the Airwalk thing happened, and that was big. We went from camping at races or rarely staying in a hotel to all of a sudden getting this call from Kim Boyle saying, I'm working for this shoe company called Airwalk, we're doing this. Chris Moeller and Pete Augustin and all these people were on at the time, and we're like, no, we get free vans from Everett. No, we don't want to rock that boat, you know. And Kim's like, no, you don't understand. This is like monthly salary, any rental car, hotel, food money, whatever you want, you know, it's yours. And we're like, what? You know, I remember calling Brian, is this for real? What's happening here?
For those guys, it was an opportunity of a lifetime. That was when their pro career really took off, because at that phase, there's a lot of guys that are really good that break doesn't come and you have to get a job. You just can't keep doing it if you want to be a real human being. And that really allowed them to be professional BMXers.
Then I think he started traveling so much that he ended up moving into the POW house.
Brian moved out to California, you know, just like all of us, you know, follow their BMX dreams. You know, he was living at the POW house, living the POW BMX lifestyle. You know, that was the good old days. You know, living in a house with 8 people, with 4 rooms, with who knows how many guests that weekend. You know, the house was just dirty, filthy, unbelievable. You know, it was just raw, dog, dirty BMX.
A filthy house packed with degenerates that are the most unmotivated dudes, and he's like going to the track 3 times a week doing gate starts. He's racing 20 times a year. He's, you know, not going to the gym that much, but he's doing sprints, and like he's really elevating himself in a really bizarre environment. Most notable thing Brian did when he was riding for Hyper was film his Dirty Deeds section.
Dirty Deeds was a pretty small underground video. It was like Keith Trainer and Mike Achenbach and Mike Griffin and that whole crew.
So Brian's living at the POW house somehow, filming Dirty Deeds, and he's doing good racing, and people are seeing that, and he's getting coverage, and he's furthering his AA career, and it's kind of moving along. But while this is going on, nobody has any earthly idea that he's riding ramps and really killing it down at Sheep Hills and street riding and stuff like that. He'd always done that, but it was never anything that was documented.
You know, at that time, it was like, you know, whoever I was hanging out with and riding with a bunch would end up being in the video. And I mean, obviously, Brian was so good, you know, I mean, anytime you'd ride with him, I mean, he's just killing it. His riding style was so different from everybody else, especially trails. He was just so smooth, just everything super clean, super dialed. I mean, it always just looks perfect, you know. I mean, it's just Brian's style, it's BF style.
So Dirty Deeds comes out and people are like, whoa, this racer dude is a bad motherfucker.
That time, you know, it started kind of getting segregated a little bit, and Brian was still holding it down with, hey, I can be a top AA pro racer and bust out a good video part, you know, in one of the best videos of all time.
I think that was a pretty big eye-opener for a lot of people. Schwinn came around in like spring of '93. That whole deal came about because this airwalk thing started, so we're traveling all these races, and I'm riding for TNT, he's riding for Hyper, pretty small companies. This guy's like, hey, you want to ride for Schwinn, just as a frame sponsor basically. Alan, you'll get $4,000, Brian, you'll get $4,000, and we're like, cool, let's do it, you know, and we ended up on these fluorescent yellow tri-moly frames, and I mean, they were like $250 retail complete bikes that they would send us, and we would take the bike apart and use the frame.
I wouldn't test one of those for BMX Plus without fear of it blowing up. And these dudes, they won some AA races. They probably really had to ride those frames 4 or 5 months. And they won races on these things. They probably put a new one together every couple weeks if they were smart, which I'm assuming that's what they did.
Airwalk was the sponsor, Schwinn was the frame sponsor, and then obviously that grew, and they hired John Paul and Truck and Trailer, and Schwinn blew up into this thing.
That's when Brian took it up another notch. He went from top 20 guy his first full year in AA. This year he was winning opens, you know, doubling, stuff like that. And, you know, he's top 10 rider, top 5 rider.
Brian Foster been on a tear lately. He's your current ABA national points leader.
And the 95 ABA Grands, you know, just rolling up, like, man, Brian Foster's up for the title. You know, how crazy is this? You know, the year before, you know, he was, you know, filming video parts and whatnot.
It's down to him and Gary Ellis. I think Gary was a little bit ahead of him, but, you know, he definitely had a real legitimate shot at winning the ABA #1 pro title. Throughout the motos, he's riding really well. He was in 5th in the semi and just, you know, passed his way in, made the main. So it's like, you're in the main, Ellis doesn't make the main. Wow.
Gary Ellis comes over that first roller, has all kinds of trouble, gets the weight over the front end, Endo City into the wall. Gary Ellis out of the main event.
So Alan, Mr. Points guy that he is, he's like 6th or better.
You've been doing that all year. You haven't gotten worse than a 6th all year. Your title's yours, you know.
Seemed confident, he didn't seem nervous or anything like that. First main, he just got caught up in a crash.
I was in the air on the second set of the triple, and it was a mess underneath me. So when I came down, I don't know who I hit or who hit me, but I went down, got 7th.
Still not that big of a deal. Second moto, going down the first straight, you know, top 4, gets squirrely on a jump, blows both feet off, and gets just loose, that's not exactly what he's known for. He doesn't get squirrely on jumps.
What is going on with Brian Foster?
Uncharacteristic of his riding abilities, Foster, like Ellis and Purse earlier in the semis, having all kinds of trouble out of nowhere.
He finished back of the pack again. Weird doubt starts creeping in. You're like, man, this shouldn't be this nerve-wracking. It should have been a little bit more of a shoo-in than this, but there's still a chance. All he has to do is get 2nd or better. He's gotten 1st and 2nds over the weekend. Mentally, he knows he can do it. He's going into the last main. He's tied for last place. There's still some wiggle room, 2nd or better. Gets down the first straight, pretty good. Top 3, top 4. Gets a good line first turn, blasts through some rhythm, passes into 2nd.
He didn't get out of the gate and was coming through, and everyone's just going crazy. Get it, you know, and he was in the position he needed to get the ABA national title. Flat turn, you know, he stays there, he's got the title. And in a second, both wheels wash.
He's going around the turn and just double tire washout. And he just was down, you know?
He went down, and the whole arena just was, no, Brian, heartbreak of a lifetime. No Jeep, no cash. Brian, I hope one day you get over that, man, because I still haven't, man. It was the biggest heartbreak for me and all your fans out there.
You know, then when they were doing the presentation, you know, because they used to do it right then and there, and they announced, you know, we've just calculated the points. And everyone's still on their toes a little bit. And Gary Ellis is the champion, you know, and Gary's like up in the stands because he'd written it off. He thought Brian's gonna get the title, and Gary got the title. Well deserved, you know, it was, you know, Gary's Gary Ellis. You can never say anything bad about Gary Ellis, but a lot of people were pulling for Brian Foster to get the title that year.
Looking back in reality and at the time, like, that's, I guess to be blunt, that was the biggest, and is to this day, the biggest choke in the history of the pro title chase. Like, and for Brian Foster to be attached to that, like, for crashing and getting squirrely, it's still really surreal, but I think he's over it. So moving into the next race season, first race of the season, Phoenix again. A couple of Schwinn bigwigs has come out, and Brian's ripping, gets second overall first day in AA. Comes up to me, he's like, they're drug testing. He smoked the day before with a couple dudes from the firm, some GT riders, some Robinson riders. So he's like, what do I do? I don't know. Let me think about it. I don't know. So I go ask our boss, Pat Harper. They're doing a random drug test for the dudes that made the main, and he's like, what kind of performance-enhancing drugs is Brian on? I'm like, none, but he smokes weed. And Pat's like, who cares? And I was like, well, that's on their list. And he's like, really? That's ridiculous. And I was like, he wants to leave. And Pat just laughed too. He's like, just tell him to take the drug test. Brian didn't know, but Schwinn, their mountain bike line was called Homegrown, and probably 50% of the people there were pro-marijuana smoking. He got picked, did the P test, and there was some controversy surrounding it. I think they were trying to get a French guy caught in a trap. I don't think the French guy was doing drugs. I think he just was a badass and trained hard. They were trying to trap the French guy, and they accidentally trapped BF because there were a bunch of GT dudes, the firm guys, that didn't make the main, that were doing good, and the word is they found out about the drug test. They got the wink wink, and none of them made the main. Drug test comes back positive, so the suspension is 6 months, and the Schwinn guys, nobody gave two shits that he was smoking weed. They thought it was completely absurd. So it was like, whatever, just race NBL. Then that's just that many less shit-filled equestrian ABA races you gotta go to.
Here you are, Sheep Hills, right down the road. Rode his butt off at Sheep, Riverside, Twin Palms, 6th Street, all kinds of trails, and we just kept riding and riding.
They took something away from him, but then he gained something out of it. He started to ride more for the reasons that he loved to, which was riding with all these people and riding sheep and progressing with tricks, and all of a sudden he's learning how to do truck drivers. It was amazing to watch this guy with all this style. He wasn't showing up to the trails and putting on a turtle suit and wearing all these crazy pads and going out there. He was more trail style, and he started to transition into the dirt jumping.
Brian's always had good timing. Right at this time, DK Dirt Circuit Series is coming up. So they're having the DK Dirt Circuits at the NBL Nationals, and Brian is racing AA, winning the dirt circuits, and people are just blown away.
Well, when it was all said and done, the winner of the dirt jumping competition was none other than Brian Foster.
I think he won the overall DK Dirt Circuit title that year, and he actually got number 2 in the NBL. That kind of gets lost in the mix, but he just switched it up. He didn't let off. He was still killing it racing.
And I just remember thinking, this guy can race, and he's the best dirt jumper in the world. This guy's the man.
The funny thing is, not winning the number 1 title, getting suspended, turning into competitive dirt jumper is like a blessing in disguise. It worked out better for him. It didn't pigeonhole him as a racer. Brian's evolution has always been, like his riding style, just real fluid. When an opportunity comes up, he makes the right path, or the right path just presents itself and he just takes it. It elevated his status as a pro rider.
The combination of not just doing a trick, but actually having a style in it, that was Brian's deal.
Brian has the added advantage of being able to go to a dirt contest where everybody's doing double front flips and twisty McFibbishers and do a 360 table and make it to the podium. And he does that on pure style, because style never goes out of style. But flippity-dippity bullshit goes in and out of style constantly. Next year's backflip is this year's whatever, and it's dumb. Brian doesn't participate in that silly game.
And the scores come in. It's the Blue Falcon riding for Airwalk. Brian Foster taking home the huge win here in Oklahoma City. He is the king of dirt.
Within 2 years after he, basically got banned from BMX racing, and that's exactly what happened. He started putting his effort into dirt jumping. He got invited to the X Games in 1998 in San Diego. Ryan Nyquist, Corey Nastasio, Joey Garcia, all kinds of heads.
We get out there and walk the course with him. We walk up on this big lip. It's on the left-hand side, there were maybe 3 lines, and then it was on the far right-hand side, there was a big landing, and Brian, we stood up there, and Brian's like, I bet I could 3 this. And I was like, man, if you 3 this, that's a contest-winning maneuver right there. Nobody else is gonna do that. He signs up, gets his stuff, bib number, 360. We're like, really? That's insane. What are the odds of that? That's like a good omen. We're like, that's cool. So he makes it through qualifying. A couple other people had tried to jump that gap straight, and just bike racked. I don't even know if he jumped it or anybody saw him jump it straight, but nobody knew he was going to 3 it. And then Brian blasts that 360 gap, gets super high score, and, you know, X Games gold.
Brian won the X Games. Like, holy shit, you know? It's like, man, he just went from being super duper top racer to within 2 years winning the ultimate award in dirt jumping ever, X Games gold.
It was just like a monumental moment that someone that was racing AA Pro came and won the trick contest. And on top of that, he was everyone's hero.
When Brian was riding for Schwinn, it was the dream ride, you know? It was big money, big budget. You know, he's got a signature bike, the Blue Falcon. It was like being on top of your game in the mid to late 90s-ish was well worth it, you know? He made money.
Brian was winning X Games gold medals in a full face helmet and a Schwinn uniform. And that helped Schwinn go out to the Arizona Ice Tees and the Mike and Ikes and the Toyotas. And it wasn't just little kids on a bike getting a couple $100 a month. It was real money and real deal. Corporate dinners and corporate lunches. And Schwinn kind of got bigger and bigger. Maybe Toyota pulled out or somebody pulled out and it started sinking. And Brian jumped ship and went to Fit pretty early on. I didn't get it at the time. I was, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't feel the Schwinn thing. I don't like it. I don't like what they're doing. And at some point it got too corporate and a little finicky, and maybe some marketing agencies were trying to run some ad campaigns, and it just lost something there.
You know, they put a lot of money, a lot of marketing, a lot of effort, a lot of everything into BMX. And that never lasts, you know, with those corporate companies. You know, it never lasts. He got a good offer, and not just a money offer, but a real deal, like, hey, this is brotherhood, you know, let's do it, we'll do you right, you know, for a long time.
I didn't understand it at the time. I was like, why would you leave Schwinn where you get, you know, thousands of dollars a month, and you're gonna go ride for one of your old buddies who's starting up a company with Moeller?
Nobody thought it was a good idea to ride for Fit because Chris is off his fucking rocker, and what the hell's Fit? And Morales, you're gonna believe that guy? I think there was a lot of people going, boy, this is a bad move.
Brian departed Schwinn at arguably the peak of that team's powers and went to a unknown, unproven entity because I think he saw the writing on the wall. There was a shift occurring in BMX, as I saw it, to leaner, more sustainable, cooler, harder core efforts, and nothing about Schwinn said cool or hardcore. That made good sense for a guy at his age and at his station in life. He had nothing else to prove. He'd been there and he'd done that. Now it was going to be fun, I think, to get aboard something that he could help grow and make his own. Have some pride of authorship in there. There's no pride of authorship in riding for Schwinn. You just get a check.
So within a year, Schwinn filed bankruptcy, and they wouldn't have fulfilled their obligation for his contract, so he made the right decision by moving on to Fit.
Brian getting on Fit was a pretty big deal because Brian was really a big hero of all of ours, and it meant a lot to a new brand, and it really made it possible for us to attract other riders to come ride on our team.
When Fit started, I had an opportunity to ride with a childhood hero, man. I looked up to him since I was 11 years old and started racing. I started because of a postcard, and that's all there was of the brand, and I had to make a decision to stop riding for the company Mosh, which I was riding for before. Just plain and simple, man. It inspired me, so I did it. Everything was coming together. It was a natural progression. I was on the same team as Brian Foster, dude. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Man, for real, like, I couldn't believe it. I was ecstatic. It was me, him, Robbie Morales, and Nate Hansen at first, and it's all because of BF, man. He's the backbone of the brand.
When Brian joined Fit in 2000, he had just come off of double knee surgery. So a lot of people were just kind of questioning what was next for him.
So yeah, when he got on Fit, he was already 28 years old, and a lot of people would have thought that, he was probably winding it down then, but we knew he was just getting going.
He was over the traditional racing thing because he just couldn't relate with the clip pedals and lifting weights. But then along comes the downhill series.
The founders of that downhill series thing for ESPN sat around and said, this is for guys like Brian Foster. I don't give a shit about the muscle-bound fruitcakes, and I hope that this track is so gnarly that nobody would even consider clipping in.
Sure enough, X Games, Brian Foster, downhill, gets second to Brandon Meadows one year and is like, gets another medal. Man, what is this guy not good at?
Fit allowed him to expand his riding into whole new outlets. He was able to do whatever he wanted at that point. Moving on from racing was really exciting for Brian because he was able to not have to be at some weird race in Wichita, Kansas every weekend. He was able to go to all the contests, but at the same time going on trips, you know, going to Barcelona, filming with the fit guys, getting invited on Road Fools, and still going to the La Revolutions, the Metro Jams, the Backyard Jams. He was really just doing it all, and I think it was a great period for him because he was so used to only being at those races and being stressed out, and the fun part of riding being secondary to that. So he was able to just put all his energy into fun. Brian Foster was having fun.
Brian Foster, I'm 29 years old, Huntington Beach, California. It's my first Road Fool.
Foster just started going to a lot of different freestyle events. You know, he's riding Metro Jams, La Revolutions against guys like Dave Asado and Brian Terrata, and he's holding his own. Those guys are pushing the technical freestyle side of things, and Brian just comes in with high speed lines and transfers, and you know, just really offering his flavor and putting a kind of a race stylish, fast spin on everything, and kind of turning a lot of heads. He stepped right up and was able to hang in whatever avenue he wanted to, and he kind of just proved at that era of his riding that he could do whatever he wanted. It was mind-blowing, of course. He's not bad at anything. 2003, the Airwalk program falls apart, so Brian parts ways with a longtime sponsor, and around that same time, his wife Jen gets accepted to a college on the East Coast, so Brian's headed to New Jersey. Greatest place to be.
You're a BMXer, being a professional guy, making money. Now you're leaving the hotbed of the industry, and you're going to move to South Plainfield, New Jersey. How are you going to make that work?
But in reality, there's lots of stuff going on the East Coast, and Brian found a way to be a part of all that. He kept plenty busy doing things like Red Bull's Mean Streets, filming for the Primo videos, filming for the Fit videos, so he just kept doing his thing. New Jersey or Cali, he's Brian Foster.
It's always tease, tease, tease. You're happy when I'm on my knees. One day it's fine and next it's black.
Jersey coming up. Brian Foster, 32 years old, South Plainfield, New Jersey. My second Road Fools, and I'm sore at the beginning of the trip.
Should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go now? Should I stay or should I go now? If I go there will be trouble, and if I stay it will be double. So come on and let me know.
All right, we're here with Brian Foster. How old are you?
32. There's a kid in pro who's 14. I could legitimately be his dad.
That's weird. You didn't make the cut. Are you as disappointed with yourself as your fans are with you?
Who wants some?
Should I stay or should I go now? Should I stay or should I go now? If I go there will be trouble, and if I stay it will be double. So you gotta let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
I think around in 2007, Fit Life came out, and Brian had an amazing part in that, Nora Cup nomination. He wasn't trying to keep up with the new school or try to impress in that way. He was just doing what he did, and I think that really cemented his riding as timeless. He had already proved he could do it all, but in the end, we want to see Brian Foster do Brian Foster, and he figured that out, and that's what he's doing now, and then that's what we all love and want to see.
Old man, look at my life. 24 and there's so much more. Live alone in a paradise that makes me think of two. Love lost, such a cost. Give me things that don't get lost. Like a coin that won't get tossed. Rolling home to you.
What's up with the Falcon out there?
Trying to have fun.
How's it going?
None of this, none of that.
Old man, take a look at my life. I'm a lot like you. I need someone to love me the whole day.
Holy shit! I cannot believe it. Brian Foster! What possessed you with this outfit?
1995 was a good year.
Heard you used to paint bikes at Cycle Crap.
I did.
I'm hurting after 2 days of this. If I fall again, the party's over.
The same old town doesn't mean that much to me. To mean that much.
A guy like Brian Foster, just back in the PA woods at Posh and Caddy, riding trails, flowing, is taken with a fondness in the BMX community, and it might not be in the most public eye, but it doesn't go unappreciated.
Not only does he love it, that's where his respect is now. I mean, anybody who's ridden any of those places, those are big ass jumps, you know. He's making it work, and I think he's having a good time, which is what it's all about, right?
September 15th, the premiere is in 9 days. At the trails with the chop. Stay fit.
Oh man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you
were. 2011 and Anthem 2 came out, and it was just awesome to see Brian Foster in there with a split part. Like, his footage is always classic. Like, you're never gonna get bored of watching some BF clips of him just ripping his local spots.
And then in May, Brian got invited to compete in the Nike Pool Jam with the top 40 international riders in the world right outside of London, England. So Van picking Brian for the pool contest was probably the best pick out of anyone because that course completely suited Brian. It was just deep in, big bowls, huge lines everywhere, and as soon as you saw Brian ride it, you knew, like, why didn't I pick Brian, you know? Like, he just completely killed it the whole weekend. He ended up winning the whole best trick contest out of everybody up against all the new school guys. There was people doing double backflip no-handers, like all this insane new tech tricks, like everything went down, but he just kept it classic.
He starts actually outside of the skate park and just comes sprinting in, dives into a crazy bowl, and does the wildest gap to wall ride out of like a 10-foot vert quarter. None of the other 39 riders would have ever spotted that line other than BF.
So then in August, Brian released a web video for Fitbikeco. It was his new stem promo that completely stoked everyone out again, and it just showed that this guy's almost 40 years old and he's still getting signature parts.
The Challenger stem is pretty much the greatest top-load stem ever, till now.
Awesome to see that the guy is still influential enough in the sport that people want to ride his parts and are still really hyped on what he's doing and his riding style, which, I mean, how can you not be?
Maybe I could have like a wedge system that clamps the bars from up, like there's no need to overdo it. It's a top-load stem.
Following the Nike contest was Red Bull Dreamline. It was an invite-only dirt contest where they invited 16 of the world's best dirt jumpers, and again, Brian Foster was there.
BF was in my top 3 choice riders out of 16 guys to invite to the event. It was a no-brainer. Like, BF is a legend, and a trail legend at that.
We started talking about this big shark fin hip. He's like, man, if you 270 that, I'll 450. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm about to make a bet with Brian Foster right here.
It's scary. Yeah. I ain't gonna lie.
He manned up. He 450'd it before me and then comes up and's like, you got 270 it now. And I was just like, oh my God, this dude is such a legend. Like, it was no joke, and no one else is gonna 450 that thing. It was just true Brian Foster right there, and I was glad I got to be one-on-one and witness it real life. It was a cool experience for me.
Unfortunately, at Red Bull Dreamline, Brian took a fall and ended up tweaking his knee a little bit, which kept him out for a little bit, pretty much the rest of the season, and he ended up having to have a little cleanup surgery and get that thing back dialed in.
March 2012, BF's about to be fully recovered from his knee surgeries, and out of nowhere, Primo drops Brian Foster. And I think the whole BMX world was just like, what? First of all, he's a legend. Second, he's still one of the most productive professional bike riders there is. His last video part was unbelievable. He won best trick at the pool contest. That's more than I did last year. Like, why would you drop Brian Foster from any sponsor, but someone who's been on your team for so long and like so loyal, and he's a legend? Didn't deserve that.
The sponsors he has now, he should be repping those brands until the day he's not even going to touch a bicycle, just because he is who he is. There's a quote I read somewhere that a man's greatest moments are usually just on the other side of his darkest. Like, end of 2011, first of 2012 for BF, like, he ended up having the knee surgery, had a little downtime, and then getting dropped by a longtime sponsor. And then fast forward a couple months, and he's in the Ride 20th Year Edition magazine for one of the top 20 influential riders ever in BMX. And then again, he's in Dig for the Legends issue, along with riders like Ruben and Joe Rich, and then gets nominated for Dirt Jump of the Year for Nora Cup, and then gets picked up by Merit, which is a new parts company. It's just crazy to see, and it's awesome that BMX gives that dude the recognition that he deserves, and they're still giving it to him, and he's 40 years old. Like, it's insane, and it's awesome to see.
Brian's riding is timeless. It'll never go out of style. It'll never be something that people won't aspire to. And it's always going to look awesome. It's always going to inspire kids to go roast some doubles or, do just a simple tabletop, because what he does looks good and he has fun doing it, and nothing else translates more than that.
Brian Foster turned 40 years old this year, and he's still on top of his game, having more fun than ever. It's pretty crazy to think back right when I started BMX and just started following it and everything. I looked up to Brian Foster, and then the generation before me, I guarantee you, looked up to Brian Foster. So it's pretty crazy. He's been through like 4 generations of BMX now, just on top of his game, and he's going to be there for a while, I think.
What would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song. I will try not to sing out of key. Yeah. Oh baby, how do you all I need is my brother. I said I'm gonna get high. Oh,
I'm here with two AA pros, Brian and Alan Foster. Everybody kind of refers to you guys as the Foster brothers, and not really knowing which one is which. For the record, on TV, you're Alan.
Fine.
All right, there it is, Bob. The Foster brothers, Brian and Alan. Back to you.
And I know as long as Brian is on this planet, he's going to be riding. If he can hold on to two grips, he can put his feet on pedals, I know in some form or some capacity, he's going to be down at the trails, deep in the woods, deep in the heart.
Feels like madness. Said I'm gonna get out of my brain. Oh, yes, I'm gonna keep trying now. Keep on trying with my brain. Oh, ain't nothing gonna stop anymore. I'm gonna keep on trying. I'm getting high. I'm gonna make it time. Oh no. Gonna get by with my friend. Oh, I'm gonna get on back.
So I just saw the video for the first time, pretty overwhelmed at just all that stuff being packed into one story. And I just wanted to thank everyone involved, and especially my wife, Jennifer. This story wouldn't be happening without her. We've been together for 23 years probably. Some of those early photos, she was there, but she's been through the BMX, all of it. Like, I come home talking about blown out knees, I'm washed up, I'm 28. Oh, you're gonna be fine, just, you know, get them fixed. Come home crying about getting kicked out of the ABA, it'll work out. So, I don't know. She's kind of a private person, so she's not out in the spotlight doing interviews and getting camera time. But I didn't want this story to be told without her being included. It's kind of like that old quote, behind every successful man, there's a kick-ass woman. Thank you, baby.
I got one negative bone to pick with him. The dude doesn't return texts. The dude doesn't return phone calls.
He doesn't text, I know that. He doesn't call, I know that.
Brian doesn't answer his phone when his sponsors call. If he don't have a problem, he don't want to talk to you. He's mowing the lawn.
Unless they've developed a lawnmower that receives text messages, Brian's not going to return your text because he doesn't even know where his phone is. Yeah, don't bother texting Brian. He's probably not going to text you back.
A day in the life, I usually mow the lawn. And that's pretty much it.
Whew. I met Brian Foster, I think, my first memories, I may have smoked him in a moto in the year or two before that, but nobody knew who he was. You know, everyone, all eyes were on me as me being the world champion racer and, you know, the top dog in the class, like taking notice of Brian Foster, you know, seeing like, okay, this guy might be up to something. Brian was never a threat, you know, when I was racing him. Once I turned pro and he stayed in the amateur class a little bit, you know, then he became a threat. He's just Brian Foster to me, you know. He was never Gary Ellis. He was never Todd Corbett. He was never, you know, Todd Blazer, you know, Greg Hill. He was just always Brian Foster that, you know, back in the day, I didn't even know him in my class. You know, I used to wax him in the 13X or whatever.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Brian Foster was just some no-name 11 intermediate. I was waxing him. I mean, I didn't really know who this kid was because obviously he's behind me. And I don't have a rear view mirror on my helmet, so I never saw this kid until I was like maybe 18, 19, when I was waxing him in A Pro, just spanking him. I mean, I'd look at the moto sheet and might as well have just been blank. I didn't see any of these guys. I mean, it wasn't until I was probably 22, 23 years old before I saw, you know, the Blue Falcon in front of me. He's pretty good. I don't know what else to say about him.
So I got married about 1.5 years ago. I invited a lot of my friends, and I invited Brian Foster. And I was so psyched when I got his RSVP back saying he was coming. Him and his wife were going to come to my wedding. And I remember at like certain moments during my wedding, this is like the biggest day of my life, right? And I got my wife, and this is nothing to take away from you, honey. But I would look over at certain moments in the wedding, she'd be like, Brian Foster's at my wedding. And I would just kind of trip out for a second. So that's kind of funny. That's like how much it means, like on the biggest day of your life, you're psyched because I'm getting married, and Brian Foster's at my wedding. So I always thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, back in the mid-90s, you know, remember the X Games didn't exist in '94. You know, the X Games first came onto the scene in '95. And that same year, you know, and I was living with Brian, you know, we got a call from MTV execs, you know, hey, we want to do a special on BMX. We want to feature you two, you know, and of course, Alan Foster, you know, we want to do a story on BMX, but not just BMX, on the Foster brothers and Todd Lyons. And to come down here, you know, with Brian and with Alan, and cameras up on a big scissor lift, and producers and guys holding microphones like this, and cameras this big, and wow, this is the real deal, you know. And not just being here and being part of it and seeing it, you know, and them interviewing Brian, and you know, and just talking about BMX. But then, holy cow, when that aired, MTV Sports just did a section on BMX dirt jumping, you know, and featured, you know, the Foster brothers and me, and it was just like, this is the big time.
So BF's living with TL, the Wild Man, and MTV Sports calls, and they were going to do a thing on the Foster brothers. So Wild Man answers the phone. Yeah, is Brian there? He's not here right now. I can take a message. Yeah, this is blah 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 from MTV Sports. MTV Sports? Yeah, what are you looking for Brian for? Oh, we're doing a piece on the Foster brothers. Yeah, well, I ride BMX. I'm a pro BMX rider too. Yeah, I'm Todd the Wild Man Lyons. Have you heard of me? They call for Brian to set up this gig to go down to Sheep Hills and film for MTV Sports, and the Wild Man intercept. So when it comes out, it's like the Foster brothers and Todd Lyons, which is completely random. I can imagine that phone call. You know, oh yeah, I'm the Wild Man. You know, yeah, you may have heard of me. I'm a 1987 double world champ. Pretty funny, like the Wild Man is intercepting calls and picking up on the Blue Falcon scraps.
Evolution, evolving. Brian's evolved like no other rider in the history of the sport. Nobody's evolved. They're all kooks. They're all cavemen. I mean, Greg Hill is still staring at a penny. Harry Leary is still combing his bald spot. Nobody fucking evolves. Brian has evolved. When racing dried up, bam, freestyle. When freestyle got done, bam, street. When, you know, street's too easy to get broke off on, bam, superstar dirt guy. The guy rules. He kicks ass.
You know, and sure enough, to this day, who knows how many years later, you know, Brian's still on Schwinn.
Yeah, Brian did some BMX Plus testing in the, I guess it would have been early 90s.
I think Brian got on like a cover ride in Auburn maybe, or something with a Pro Fork, or they'd put us in the BMX Plus outfits and with Axo leathers, and it kind of didn't make sense at the time. If we're getting paid by Hyper or TNT or whoever it was, but then going to ride this Auburn with Pro Forks and Axo gear, it didn't make sense, but we did it, and you didn't get paid for it. You just did it because, I don't know, you got that phone call, and that's just what you did.
That's a testament, I think, to Brian's ability. If you can get out there and ride those just hoopty ass bikes, and you can get out there and do what Brian was doing on them, you can ride anything.
At some point, I think you just reach that point where like, you know, maybe I shouldn't be doing that anymore. But if you look back at it now, I mean, man, try to ask Mike Aiken to go ride some bike with a Pro Fork and a axle. No way that stuff would happen, you know?
To me, and a lot of people that I know and respect, I'd rather see Brian do a table 3 more than any other trick anyone's gonna do. It's just absolute classic definition of BMX, and there's no one who can do that or replicate that. Whereas there are people who can replicate whatever the newest flippy trick is, you know, where you're so constant on those tricks, you're so concentrated on the doing of the numbers, you know, 2 tail-ups and a bar spin and a truck driver and a backflip. There's no room for concentrating on the form of it. And Brian's just classic form, and that's, I don't know, that's what I like to see in bike riding.
I don't think he has to fit in. I don't think fitting in matters to Brian. Doing what Brian does matters to Brian. Having some integrity, having some dedication to his scene, and that's probably enough. I'm glad to see that he's being rewarded for it, because there's too many douchebags that are doing the same shit as everybody else is doing and bitching because they don't get recognized for it. That's being a deck monkey. Nobody gives a shit about deck monkeys. Brian's an original.
I've been in this business for 25 years, and I mean, we've had a lot of riders. We've had more riders on our teams than Spinal Tap's had drummers. We've had a lot of guys come and go and come back. I mean, I think we've had guys on the team quit, come back, multiple times. And through all these people and all these years, I can honestly say that Brian has been my favorite guy to work with the whole time, because there's zero drama with Brian. He doesn't get wrapped up in any kind of you know, bullshit industry stuff. He tells you how it is. He doesn't waste your time. He doesn't text you at 2 in the morning or show up on your porch trying to get burrito money. He shows up. He doesn't miss flights. He doesn't complain about things. He's not a pain in the ass. He's not a prima donna. He's just an absolute dream team rider. I always hear people talking about, you know, what should I do to get sponsored? Well, what you should do is study Brian Foster and be exactly like Brian Foster. Ride your bike, get coverage, be a nice guy, don't bullshit people. I can safely say if you can do half of what Brian's done, you're going to be a successful pro rider, and like guys like me, you're going to make our lives a whole hell of a lot easier. I wish we could clone him.
So the first time BF meets Homan, some terrible ABA race in Wichita, Kansas, equestrian center, 5 foot tall starting hill, soft dirt, 2 foot high berms, you know, just Brian's miserable. It's one of those races. Actually mentions it quite a bit. He just showed up at the airport, hand the lady's ticket. She's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "I have no idea." She's like, "Oh, looks like Wichita." And he was just like, "Here." Get to Wichita, I rent the van, pick up Brian, and then I was like, this new kid, Van Homan's new dirt jumper kid. He's like, I think I heard of that kid. I don't know. So pick up Homan, never flown before, completely clueless, out of his mind. You know, he's 16, 17, just hyped and hyper. So he gets in the van, I'm driving, BF's in the passenger seat, Homan, just like this, asking a million questions in Brian's face. Where'd you get this van? Whose van is this? It's a rental van. What do you mean a rental van? They just have it waiting here for you? Yeah, they're at the airport. Oh, that's insane. What is that lady? And he's like, looks at Brian, he's like, what's that lady, the waitress lady on the plane? What does she do until Sunday? And Brian's just like, just looking at him like, what are you talking about? He's like, the waitress lady on the plane. I was like, the stewardess? I was like, she doesn't just wait around in Wichita until Sunday, until you fly home. She's flying around, like to other places. And he was just like baffled. And he was just like a little puppy, and Brian was just glaring at me like, who is this kid and where did you find him?
Okay, describe my style of riding. I like to think that my style of riding is like an old, nice pair of shoes. They're just like classic, comfortable, not too many bells and whistles. Just nice.
I don't want to picture BMX without a Brian Foster around. because there's never going to be another BF. There's never going to be a Blue Falcon. There's not going to be the next guy coming up. So like, I don't want to picture it. When he does, when he decides to, you know, step away, and whether that's 5 years or 5 months, like, I think he's always just going to leave behind that legacy of just kind of doing it the right way and doing it for the right reasons and just having a pure love for being on a BMX bike. And I can honestly say that there'll never, ever be another Brian Foster. Not in my lifetime anyways. I was like getting choked up for real. I was like, shit.
Well, it's like he's died or something, isn't it?
For real, like, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to picture BMX without BF.
Oh yeah, we're about to roast this shit. Gonna fold this up so hard. Chase Hawk's gonna piss his pants while Chris Doyle holds his hand. It's starting to get a little weird here. Maybe you could hump the stem a little. Yeah, there you go. Just land on the wheels and just ball ride it. It should be good. Don't put out your leg. No, don't put out your leg. All right, get the number for the knee guy, schedule an MRI for this week, and see if anyone has any crutches. Get a hold of Builtwell, tell him that the helmet testing is going well. That hurts. Should get surgery in the next couple weeks. Pretty much 6 months vacation coming up. Fuck off.